The atmosphere in La Perosa was unlike anywhere else on Earth. It was heavy and ancient, thick with the stagnant scent of centuries-old dust and forgotten magic. After 6 months in La Perosa, Jin sat beneath a massive fountain, training his mind. The water thundered behind him, a relentless roar drowning out the world, but he remained still, his breathing shallow and rhythmic. The fountain's spray chilled his skin, yet he did not shiver. He was preparing for the challenges he would face in the future. Every fiber of his being was focused on the horizon of his potential, a horizon that felt frustratingly distant despite the grueling labor he endured as mist clung to his eyelashes. He sat motionless, reflecting on the past 6 months of training and the improvements he had made. He mentally catalogued every scar, hardened muscle, and ounce of stamina gained since entering this inheritance ground. Yet, at the conclusion of his self-assessment, a cold weight settled in his chest. He was not satisfied with the results. To anyone else, the progress would have seemed miraculous. But for a Runcandel and a brother to the Plutonians, merely good enough was a death sentence. The memories of his arrival remained vivid, etched into his mind by the sheer physicality of the trials. Upon arriving at the inheritance ground, he spent the first 2 months with the Battle Kings building basic physical strength. It was a period of raw, unadulterated pain. He remembered the looming figures of the 12 Battle Kings, their eyes like cold stars as they watched his every move under their supervision. The training was primitive but effective. They tied massive boulders to their backs and performed non-stop squats, along with other strength training. He could still feel the phantom weight of those stones, the rough ropes biting into his shoulders, and his knees trembling until they felt ready to shatter. Hour after hour, day after day, he pushed against the limits of his mortal frame. Once his body was forged into a vessel of endurance, the nature of his torment shifted. Following that, he sparred with the 5 Battle Kings for 4 months. These were not mere practice sessions. They were onslaughts by warriors far more powerful than him. Every time he entered the ring, he felt like a child attempting to hold back the tide. What made it more humiliating was the restraint shown by his opponents. The Battle Kings used neither Aura nor Nether King sword techniques. They fought with only raw instincts and physical prowess. Yet, it was more than enough to overwhelm him. Jin's mind raced as he recalled those countless defeats. He tried to match them using every bit of his strength, but the more he fought, the more he realized the chasm between them spanned worlds. He could not even avoid the Plutonian attacks. He was bruised and cut everywhere, his skin a map of lacerations. His movements were constantly interrupted by heavy fists or lightning-fast kicks. When he attempted to attack, his strikes never reached them, as if he were hitting shadows or the wind. No matter how hard he tried, they blocked his moves easily. Even when he pushed his mysterious lineage to the forefront, the results remained unchanged. He used his Heart of the Nether King to attack, but even then it made no difference. Power flared within him, a dark, ancient pulse, but it met the immovable wall of Battle King experience. Jin felt deeply frustrated, knowing he had obtained the Heart of the Nether King and possessed his brother's engraved techniques in his head. He had the knowledge and the power, he remembered every attack pattern and technique. But knowing the path was not the same as walking it. Despite his divine gifts, he was thrown around like a powerless doll. In the quiet beneath the fountain, he felt despair, a heavy, suffocating emotion threatening to extinguish his inner fire. However, Jin was not a man to be broken by sadness. The powerlessness he felt motivated him to push forward. He knew the stakes. The world was full of strong people he had to face, like his brother, the wolf race, and the Zippel mages. He envisioned their arrogance and predatory hunger, realizing he was currently nothing before them. A bitter smile touched his lips as Jin cursed himself, thinking he could only survive by receiving help. He felt like a burden, a passenger in his own destiny. He remembered escaping the secret palace only through Murakan and Misha's help. Then the memory shifted to the Holy Land, where he failed to protect those he wanted to save. The faces of those lost haunted his dreams. He felt that protecting a life was endlessly far away. Thinking this, Jin finally opened his eyes, knowing he could not stop there. The despair transformed into cold, hard resolve. He grabbed his sword and stood up, his determination unwavering. The number of people he had to protect was increasing endlessly. He counted them, his allies, subordinates, the beastmen, his friends who risked their lives, and finally his master whom he hadn't even met in this life. They were his anchors. He stood and held his sword high, the blade catching La Perosa's dim light, a sliver of silver against the gray. He wanted to understand his brother's intentions and the effort they spent training him. He knew they weren't beating him for sport, they were showing him something he couldn't yet see. Jin then swung his sword into the air with full force, a strike born of frustration, hope, and sheer will. The water splashed high, droplets shimmering like falling diamonds. High above on a jagged precipice, the Battle Kings watched him. Their silhouettes were imposing against the horizon. Seeing the force of the attack, they were concerned for Jin, noting the desperation and frantic energy of a man who felt the clock ticking. The eighth king, Garmund, asked if it was okay to continue like this. He looked down, noting there was little time and no hint of improvement. The fifth king, Boris, replied that this was the decision of the god of war and an absolutely necessary process. He added that they must understand this as well. Looking at the young Runcandel, he pointed out that unless Jin could realize it on his own, the overpowered swordsmanship in his blood would remain stagnant. For that reason, he couldn't move forward without reaching the required proficiency. Boris sighed, the sound like wind through ancient trees. He said it depended on the trainee, true mastery could not be rushed by desire alone. The fourth battle king said most never realize this in their whole lives. The tragedy of the talented is having the tools but not the hand to wield them. Boris then told them to go back, as Jin needed to take his own time. He knew some realizations only came in the solitude of the soul. Garmund thought of something while Jin continued swinging his sword. The sons of Laparosa began to dip, casting long purple shadows. After the session, Jin changed clothes and walked through the forest. The trees here were twisted, their metallic leaves clinking in the breeze. Suddenly, Jin spotted a familiar figure. The massive eighth battle king stood in a small clearing, his presence impossible to miss. Jin stopped, shocked to see him, as the kings usually kept their distance outside of training. They greeted each other with smiles, sharing a rare moment of levity between warrior and student. Garmund produced a golden bottle and invited Jin for a drink. The vessel seemed to glow, the liquid inside swirling like trapped sunlight. Soon, the two were drinking together in the forest, sitting on soft moss while the air filled with the chirping of otherworldly insects. They chatted happily, unconcerned with the outside world. For a moment, the weight of being a Runcandel felt a lifetime away. Jin recounted his experiences from the secret palace, the bustling imperial streets, and the friends he had left behind. Garmund then asked how he was finding Laparosa and if he was struggling with his training. Jin nodded, admitting he felt lost because he didn't understand his brother's intentions. After a long draught of the warm liquor, he noted that no one had used the shadow sword or bright night techniques. This was the source of his confusion. They practiced constantly, yet the core techniques he expected to master remained hidden. He concluded there must be a reason, realizing how much he still lacked. Garmund seemed stressed, unable to reveal the purpose of this training, as Jin needed to discover its effectiveness for himself. He shifted uncomfortably, the secret heavy on his tongue. Before he could speak, the seventh battle king, Belace, asked what they were doing there. Her sharp voice cut through the peace. Jin looked up to see her perched on a branch like a bird of prey. She jumped down silently onto the moss, her eyes dancing with mischief. She claimed the eighth king held a lot of affection for Jin and was likely disturbing his training. Jin asked if that was true, looking between the two giants. Garmund turned away, his cheeks flushing red under his beard. Belace mocked him, noting he was sweating heavily. Garmund stammered that he just wanted to talk about life, looking like a giant caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Belace picked up the bottle and asked with a smile why, if they were just talking, he had stolen the 600-year-old gemstone liquor. Hearing this, Jin realized why the flavor was so deep and looked at the bottle with newfound respect. Belace asked if it wasn't incredible. As he sipped, Jin praised the drink. Even the finest Runcandel wines couldn't compare. A faint golden glow appeared as his aura reacted to the ancient brew. Belace smirked, stating that if it was enjoyable, the eighth king would have to pay by working in her winery. Garmund was frustrated but remained silent, knowing he was caught red-handed. Surprised, Jin asked if she made the liquor herself, as he hadn't pegged the fierce seventh king as a vintner. Belace proudly replied that she crafted it daily with great care and invited Jin to see. Jin agreed, welcoming a mental break from his grueling regimen. Belace led him into a massive cave hidden by vines. Inside, the floor was engraved with multicolored gemstones, creating a kaleidoscope of light against the walls. Jin was astonished. It wasn't the winery he had imagined. There were no wooden barrels, but rather a large-scale facility filled with crystalline vats and humming machinery. In the center, the true work happened. A huge gemstone sat inside a liquid-filled glass container, pulsing with amber light. Beneath it, Garmund was rolling a massive wheel, his muscles straining as he turned a mechanism that looked like it weighed tons. Standing on a small interior cliff, Belace announced that Garmund had to squeeze out a year's worth of liquor. The task was monumental. Garmund sighed in frustration and accepted his fate, his shoulders slumping as he began the grueling rotation. Jin watched in silence, realizing that even in their chores, the Plutonians were teaching him. Every movement was a lesson in persistence, proving that greatness requires immense time and effort.